You are listening to Abnormal Spaces.
I'm Donnie.
I'm Ryan.
In this podcast, we discuss conceptual realities, the researchers, authors, and explorers who describe and define them, as well as our personal experiences in these abnormal spaces. In this episode, we discuss whether or not humans have free will, the theoretical evidence of pre-determinism, the compatibility with non-duality, and their relation to the field of narrative psychology. So I was listening to this video. I guess I was watching it and listening to it. But anyway, this physicist was somewhat defending her position on the lack of free will, and she actually drew a line essentially from non-duality to there being no free will. And it touched on a lot of the things that we've talked about in the past, like how we don't know where a thought originates from, and as soon as we try to conceptualize where that thought came from, that's another thought, and you can't ever get back to that first thought. And so kind of where she was going with it was there are certain things that are determined, predetermined, and then there are things that are random. And the two actually work together. So it's not like one erases the other, or, disconfirms the other, I guess is what I should say. It's not that they are incompatible. It's just you have to accept that there are things that happen the same way every time, and then there are things that are random. And her point basically is, since you can't figure out where that thought came from, and since you have to accept that some things are random, you also have to accept the fact that when you're making a decision, it is based on all of these other things that you don't have control over, number one. Number two, although we do have, through a lot of experimentation and research, we do have a pretty good understanding of how decisions and opinions are actually developed in the brain. We still don't have the kind of control that we think we have over that. And so that was basically her position, was that, you can't really say that you have carte blanche free will when you don't even have control over where the thoughts originate from in the first place, how you make the decisions. And it's true. The way that humans, or at least the way we understand now, the way humans make decisions, it's an electrochemical process, and it is based on a lot of prior information and fallible information too, as far as, incomplete memory, etc. So essentially her point was that if all of these other things are true, the way we believe them to be true, then that means that you don't 100% have free will. And I just thought that was really neat, because we've talked several times about thoughts and where they generate from and what they do and what they mean, etc. And she used the example of like a photon. It typically bounces one way or whatever. And they're saying, well, yeah, but what if it bounced the other way? And she's like, well, sure, yeah, what if? But we haven't observed that, and we don't have a way to make it do that. So at the end of it all, that was, and it's somewhat unsatisfying because there is no answer, but I was like, oh yeah, man, that fits in with a lot of the stuff that we talk about, I thought.
It's exactly what we talk about all the time. And me and Sabin just talked about this last night, which is weird that we are just talking about it now.
Yeah.
It's just random, but that's where this story comes in. And we're like, oh, that's a synchronicity.
Yeah.
Or that's everything has to happen for a reason because we were just talking about this last night, and then now we're talking about it now, and we haven't talked. Me and you.
Yeah.
But that's just more story. I started thinking about it last night. I was watching a video by this lady named Candace Silvers. She's like an energetic healing person, but she also like has some kind of human behavioral workshops and things. And, you know, normally I'm kind of like, meh, about that.
Yeah.
But, for some reason I had heard a couple things from her, and I was like, well, that's interesting. And then I saw some videos of like her going to Bali, and that's where she learned all this crazy, like, I mean, it was just like the documentary, Sixth Floor, Expanding Possibility. These like authentic healers were doing these crazy things, man. Like, I mean, it's stuff that, you know, like somebody comes in with like a crooked scoliosis back, and like you start watching it get straight.
Crazy.
Stuff like that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
This old man, he's just like sitting there with this little wooden poker thing, and people just go up there and he pokes certain places like between your toes, and he's like, this is your heart, this is your this is your that. And then like when he hits a place that hurts you or like sends a whatever, then he's like, oh yeah, you got a problem here and you got a problem here. And then he does like this, well, they do different things. One guy was smoking a cigarette, and he used the tobacco smoke as like this, he would blow smoke in your eye and shit. Like it's just really
Yeah.
stuff we don't know. You know, it's kind of like shaman type things. But it was interesting because the guy went up there and he said, he laid down and he pushed in on his leg, and the indention stayed there it just stayed there.
Oh, weird.
And he was like, your blood it's too thick, basically. And then so what he did, he took that little poker and he like poked him in a certain spot, and this guy was like, ow. You know, he's like, you know, like, and I'm just like, dang, dude.
Yeah.
And then after that, he poked him in the same spot again on his leg, and it just bounced right back.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
You know.
Yeah.
That was a ramble. But, going back to the free will thing. So we were talking about that, and I watched some of this, talk she was giving, and I realized it was for a person maybe who was just hearing this stuff for maybe the first time.
Nice.
So like, I have all these ideas from, you know, looking into this shit for so long. You get to a point where you feel like you can't hear anything else, almost.
Yeah.
Which is absolutely a trap.
Yeah.
Because your mind is just, it's come to a conclusion that you can't hear anything else.
Yeah, right.
So that's the not free will part.
Yeah.
Where your mind comes in and says that.
Yeah.
It says anything.
Yeah.
And then you just follow it along blindly.
Right.
So, you know, it's like if somebody just came in and was like, believe me, believe me, believe me, I wouldn't believe them.
Right. Yeah.
But in some weird way, we believe what this entity or whatever this thing is that we call me, most people call me, but it's actually, this is funny because I said, when Ella was a little girl, like 5, she used to call her mind my think.
Oh.
And whenever she said that, I was like, that's genius, because she doesn't know any better.
Right.
And what she's seeing is it's my think. There's this thing called a think,
right, and
it's mine.
Yeah.
But I'm not it.
Yeah. And you have yours and I have mine.
Right.
Yeah.
So, that's when I was like, whoa, that was the only time I've ever really seen it in real time like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I started thinking about that, and I was like, well, there's like this imposter. It's almost like, it's like a phantom that just randomly parades around, and we become a slave to it, because that's all we know.
Right.
But actually, it's nowhere to be found ever. We can't find it. And it also claims that we can go places other than here and now. Like we can project into the future of whatever, or we can go into the past. But that phantom mind, or whatever we call it, thinking, it is random based on apparently, and this is another story. So this is when it gets sticky, and whenever it's kind of, I think you're coming to a crossroads, is whenever you see that the story is pretty much it's all unprovable.
Right.
Yeah, so you can't prove a future outcome, and you can't prove anything that happened in the past.
Right.
And people are like, well, there's pictures of the past. What if I get a picture? Or what if I watch a movie of the past? I'm like, well, so the story comes in, you're watching this video, and it says, that was me when I was 19.
Right.
But you're watching that now.
Right.
And that doesn't prove that you were ever 19.
Right.
Even though our culture and it teaches us to believe, obviously, duh.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
There's the proof.
But I'm just talking about right now.
Yeah.
That's all there is. So there's just this.
Yeah.
Ever. There's only ever this. There only ever has been this.
There only ever will be this.
Yeah. And those have been and will be. This makes that possible.
Yeah.
To even say that.
Yeah.
This is just me talking. I'm not giving information like this is the way it is.
Yeah.
This is just for me personally. But I realized after listening to Candace Silvers how much I am not here.
Yeah.
Because after I listened to that, I started becoming hyper aware for a little while of trying to be here. Well, I know I'm already here, but trying to be engaged fully with what's presently in front of me without paying attention to the lies and the stories that are constantly going on.
Yeah.
And it is impossible, it seems.
Yeah.
At first. So this is what's interesting. Now I've got this whole new kind of outlook or something. Like before I was like, well, there's nothing you can do to bring about anything. And there's nothing, you don't have free will.
Right.
So everything we talk about is a paradox.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah.
So just knowing that everything's a paradox and that it can't make sense, it makes it a little easier to just kind of like get the mind to go into a more dormant type of state where you're not being controlled by it and where you are actually, instead of calling it this, it's you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so one thing that I think is pretty interesting about that is, so there's this field of psychology, I think it's called narrative psychology or something like that. But anyway, essentially what it has to do with is when you tell yourself the story of yourself, which we all do. And what's interesting is we can't stop it, or at least no one has figured out yet how to. So with so many things, if you can't figure out how to stop it and you can't figure out where it starts, then the only thing you can do is grab a saddle and figure out how to ride it. So what this field of research and experimentation and theses, whatever the plural of thesis is, yeah, right. It's probably something totally different. Oh, plural is theodicis.
Sorry.
But anyway, so an event happens in one's life and they tell themselves a story about it so that they can understand it or whatever. And if you choose to make that story something that is, I'm trying to remember the two, basically there is a contamination or like it's almost like an ascendant thing. So, but long story somewhat shorter, if a person is able to tell themselves this story that not only makes sense to them, but also puts them more in charge or more like they were on the way to something better. So like, let's say you have an event that happens and in that moment, there's some kind of negative or adverse outcome to your life. But a month later, something great happens and that great thing would not have happened if the bad thing whatever that was happen. So when you tell yourself the story, if you are in that first, week or so after the event and you're telling yourself, this negative thing, and this happened to me or whatever, then you're limiting yourself. And again, that's stuff we talk about all the time too. But if you put the end of the story for that chapter of whatever that event is, if you put it after the good part happened, then it's like a redemption. That's the thing, is a redemption. So it's redemption and contamination. So anyway, so then you're on this redemption arc. And we all like that. Everyone wants to feel like the hero, or like they've bested some foe, or whatever the thing was holding them back from the thing they wanted. Now they've conquered that thing or whatever, and now they've achieved the thing they wanted to achieve. Anyway, those are all the things that we tell ourselves. And I can't remember if it was the second or the third episode where we were talking about that, and like how there isn't an I, and when we call our mind as if it's separate from our body, or as if it's a separate entity, that's just wild, but that's how most people conceive of it. And I just kept coming back to, yeah, man, it all comes down to what we choose to believe, how we choose to believe it. And yet we can't really control that. The only thing we can control is the story that we tell ourselves about whatever it is. And that's just wild to me, because it really isn't a separate entity. I'm not telling myself the story of myself actively. That's all running in the background all the time. But when you get into a negative headspace, one of the things that you can do to combat that is to actively take over the narration role and reframe it into something that's going to work better for you. It's more palatable.
Or so it seems.
Or so it seems. I know.
It's like the snake eating its tail.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
It's like that.
Yeah.
The no choice of having a thought is the most perplexing thing ever, because you can't figure it out.
Right.
Because you figuring it out also is not a choice.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So you doing something to make the thought go down or become dormant or whatever I was just talking about, that's more of that.
Yeah.
It just seems like you can. And that's where everything gets stuck.
Right.
Because it seems like you are controlling the thoughts.
Yes.
And it seems like you are the thoughts.
Yes.
But what's interesting about that, to me, is that we're sitting in this room and I'm looking at everything in this room, looking at you, and it's like, this is given always now. And I say now for lack of a better term. I like this because whatever this is, it's always this.
Yeah.
So we didn't make this.
Right.
And we didn't have to do anything to have this moment.
Right.
Or whatever we call it.
Yeah.
It's not a moment even. Whatever this aliveness is, we don't know anything about it. And we can't ever know anything about it because it's already given. The moment that you would know something about it, you've taken a step away from it.
Right.
In a way, because you can't ever step away from it. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. And that's what's kind of funny to me about the whole narrative thing, is that is yet another attempt to assert what we believe to be control over what is essentially uncontrollable.
Yeah.
So we have to tell ourselves that we can tell ourselves. And it's like, can we though? I don't know if we've talked about this, but I'll tell you, I was in a car wreck one time, and completely my fault. But at the moment the other car hit my car, time moved so slowly. Because my car flipped, it rolled into this ditch and rolled over into this field. And, And as soon as that car hit, everything went into the slow motion, and I was fully aware of what was happening. I was actually thinking about like the dynamics of it, like the force of the other car and everything else. And when my car came to a stop, it was on the roof. So I was upside down, and I just nonchalantly like turned the engine off. And I remember getting the keys out of the ignition and putting them into my pocket. And the girl I was seeing at the time, I was like, "Are you okay?" And I'll never forget, she like licked her teeth to make sure all of her teeth were intact. And she's like, "Yeah, I think I'm good." And then I crawled out of the car. And as soon as I crawled out of the car, time resumed the normal speed.
Yeah.
And I've never experienced anything quite like that. Mm. If I knew that I could afford it and not get hurt, I'd probably get in a car wreck once a year, just to see if I could experience all that again. But yeah, I think that was one of the things. I mean, I already had all these, big thoughts, and unanswerable questions, but that whole deviation of my experience of time kind of set a lot of these thoughts into motion that I have today. Because I experienced it and I was like, okay, wait a minute. Time isn't real. The only thing that's real is my perception of the time. And that's not even necessarily real. That's just an algorithmic equation going on in the background.
It's another story.
It's another story. Yeah. And it's a story that I didn't make up and that we all agree to loosely, but mostly all agree to. And none of us made the story up.
None of us made any of the stories up.
Yeah. So how?
Well, I don't know. A part of it, I think, is learned. The stories are learned. And I don't know from year 0 or 1 or to year 10, that's when the stories are made.
Yeah.
Maybe like the core beliefs and stories, because you learn that you're a you, and you learn that that's a that, and you learn what's good and what's bad and what to do, and don't touch that. You burn yourself, right? Before you know it, you already, without your say so, you have become a quote person.
Yeah.
But as we've said before, there's absolutely no difference at this moment between what you were when you were first born.
Right.
You're the same thing. You're the same thing.
Yeah.
It's just, you're just awake. That's it.
Well, and that also ties back to the no free will thing. I mean, you are the same as you were when you were born.
Yeah. There's just awake.
Yeah.
And you don't even know when you were born. That's the thing. Yeah. That's the story that you were told as well.
Yeah. Well, and like that also ties into how memory works, and we've talked about that. But what I think is interesting is I don't believe any of this was designed by some designer. However, I do believe that our cognitive abilities appear to have adapted over time, and the memory function was not adapted to catalog every single detail. At the end of the day, all it was supposed to do was say, one time I passed by this cave and a bear came out. So this cave, I'm not going in. Right. And I'm going to be cautious on all the other caves too. That's it though. And so, when we're in the current time that we live in and there's, unprocessable amounts of information, and then we try to debate whose memory of something was correct or who has more details or whatever. And I'm like, it's all subjective. It's all relative to your experiences, and you're never going to have all those details. And it's fine. I mean, I look around, I'm like, half the details are irrelevant all day long anyway.
99% of the thoughts that circle around and around are the same thoughts all the time.
Yeah.
I don't know how you think, but I'm sure it's different for everybody.
Sure.
But I have pictures. I have like these loose I don't even want to call them pictures. I just want to call them like these loose scenes of something, where I can just kind of see it.
Yeah.
But I can't see it.
Yeah.
I don't know where it's at.
You're right. Yeah.
And sound. Yeah. Like so when you have a song stuck in your head, and it seems like it's a bunch of different things happening at once, but it's actually not.
Right.
It's only one thing happening at once, you know?
Yeah.
One thought would contain the song, and it would contain the idea that I don't want to go get a oil change. It sounds like a bummer. And it would also contain the image of me sitting in the oil place.
Right.
But that's all one thing happening.
Yeah.
But we perceive it as a bunch of different things.
Yeah.
You can have more than one at once.
Yeah.
But you can't.
I listened to a podcast the other day, and they were talking about, like, you know, trying to take in as much sensory input as possible for something that you want to really remember well. And I'm like, that's all well and good. But when I repaint it, yes, I'll have more to repaint that with, but it's still not going to be accurate no matter what I do. It's only going to be so accurate. And then, like, there are some people that when they have a thought, they, instead of picturing an item, they like see the word. And I think that's kind of fascinating. And then like how, like if I say apple, you know, everyone's going to have an image of an apple, and whether it's a Red Delicious or a Granny Smith doesn't matter. And whether it's a 2D image or a 3D image doesn't matter. What I'm fascinated with was rarely is it an actual apple from my actual experience. And I'm sure with certain things, of course, it'd be different, but it's just really an amalgamation of all the apples I've ever experienced, and whichever one kind of rises to the top is the one that pops first in my brain.
Yeah.
That's wild to me. Why wouldn't it be like the most delicious? Because I like Brayburn apples. And why wouldn't it be like the first time I had a Brayburn and me going, man, this is my kind of apple? But it's not, you know, why? Why isn't it?
Well, the why, man. That's the whole thing, is just why? And what why does is keep you from being where you're at.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
And it's amazing because it seems like you can practice this. And this is where the paradox comes in. It seems like I can practice being here and being in the moment of what I'm doing, because how do I know? What's the barometer for that? Well, am I nervous? Am I uncertain? Am I like shaken? Because I don't know.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Because when I'm telling myself a story, or whenever there's a story that is claiming to be true, then that's what I'm paying attention to. And it has nothing to do with me sitting in the dentist chair actually getting a filling.
Right.
It's, this is going to hurt because I've had it hurt before.
Yeah.
Which I don't even know that I really have.
Right. Yeah.
So it's about being here and experiencing and living the experience, and not following this story that is a phantom that just you can't find ever. You'll never be able to find it.
Right.
And we have explanations for it, like neurons fire in the brain and the hammer.
Yeah.
And it's just like, so what?
Right. Yeah. But here's what's crazy to me is, like you were saying, we can practice this. We can go, you know, and I feel so liberated just letting go and saying, you know what, we're not going to know this stuff. And I'm totally good with that. Yet, almost instinctively, I want to ask why first.
Yeah.
And then I go, it's not that big of a deal. But why?
It's the story communicating with itself.
Yeah, back to that snake eating his tail almost.
Yeah, the story says, I don't care, and then it says, but.
Yeah, but you kind of do.
But you don't do anything.
Right, yeah.
You're just this, like, I've heard people call it everything. You're just this space. You're just this awakeness. You're just awake. It can't be known because it is everything.
Right. Well, and like just back to the whole thing of like, I am only an ordering of molecules separate from this chair. Like, really, we're like 99% the same, me in this chair.
Or 100.
Or 100. Yeah, it's just ordered differently.
You know, everything is energy. Well, then that means everything.
Right, yeah.
So...
And does that mean nothing is energy too?
Yeah, exactly. The idea of nothing is energy moving as this weird story.
Yeah.
It's wild. But the thing that the story has no sway over is this.
Right.
Right. So there's this always.
Yes.
That the story lives in.
Yeah.
Or it appears to live in.
Right. Yeah.
And it's the only time that it can happen. It's not even a time. It's where time lives. It's where the idea of time and the illusion of I can go there, or I can project back to that, or I can have whatever I can.
Yeah.
Just that thought, I can.
Yeah.
That's where that lives.
Yeah.
And it has no bearing on this.
Right.
It doesn't do anything to it.
Yeah. Well, and then just one step removed from that, I.
I. Exactly. What is I? What is I that is so important?
Yeah. Yeah. It's almost like I is on, and that's it.
Well, that's what it seems like. But to me, but whenever that shit happens, I'm just like, it's the one that makes reality.
Yeah.
It's the one that shapes reality, because like actually everything is just a mirror of that story.
Yeah.
And there's only one story. Here's the thing that gets really weird. There's only one story. There's not 7 billion stories, or however many people in the world.
Right.
There's not that many stories going on. There's only one story.
Yeah.
That story is not unique.
No.
And there's only one of them.
Right.
And it's impossible for us believing that we are an individual to even like see that there's only one story. Going back to what I saw yesterday, I was just like, oh, that's wild, because you say they, I say they, them, I say we, I say me. If you're standing up there talking and you say point to me, I point to you.
Yeah.
But it's all me. And I don't mean that like me, Ryan.
Right.
There's only one me.
Yeah.
You know? So, and there's only one them. You know, like the other people in the room are looking at me as a them.
Right.
I'm looking at them as a them.
Yeah.
So there's only one them. There's not multiple thems.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a weird one to wrap, to try to understand.
Yeah. And I'm not trying to understand that. It's just, you get a moment of realization or something, and it's only maybe a second or a fraction of a second where you feel like your stomach drops out a little bit or something, and you're just like,
Yeah.
I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. I guess.
Well, you're not going to know anyway.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. I mean, it's all somewhat frustrating. And I don't know. I really appreciate the people who have really considered this and have tried to follow these thoughts and have tried to put names to things and stuff. I mean, I do really appreciate that. And I don't think it is not worthwhile. I do think it is worthwhile. I think ultimately there really isn't an answer, because there isn't really a question. And I think ultimately there really isn't an I versus a we or anything like that. However, it's easier to navigate this experience with some of those thoughts being shared by people who have thought them. And I'm able to find like some kind of, ballast to cling on to as I try to work my way through this experience. And I understand, as I'm saying that, I'm not actively working my way through anything. I'm just trying to actively understand, or at least make sure that I am experiencing things in the best way for me. And that comes out weird too. Cause it doesn't like totally line up with everything that I just said.
Yeah.
But for lack of a way to explain that, I do appreciate those people and I do appreciate those thoughts and I do appreciate, the care that has gone into trying to figure out some of this stuff.
Yeah. And that's the story of you appreciating.
Yeah. That's true.
That's what I mean. And so I'm not being like an asshole saying this, but just to navigate, that's just happening. Like that's automatic.
Right.
I don't have to navigate. I don't have to have these quote weird, profound thoughts about these things. I don't have to do anything. I'm not actually doing anything.
Right.
There's actually not anybody here doing anything.
Right. Yeah.
Like, or nobody there or nobody anywhere doing anything. Like we're not doing anything because we don't know how to do it.
Right. It's being done. Yeah. Where's the thought come from?
I'm going to go to the store today. Nah, I'm not going to go to the store today.
Yeah.
It's just amazing.
Yeah.
It's mind blowing, like in a way, because it's like, wow, it all takes care of itself.
Sure. Yeah.
Always.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I don't disagree with that. And the clunky language aside, we're not saying necessarily different things.
Right. Right.
But yeah, it is paradoxical and, and again, ultimately frustrating. But that's what it is.
Or liberating.
Or liberating. Yeah.
Or whatever. Just whatever that random thing, that random little phantom decides it is.
Yeah. Well, and I
Is
guess
what it is.
it's all contextual too. It's frustrating if you really want some kind of answer to say, good, check the box, I know now.
Right.
But it's liberating when you're like, hey, turns out this is unknowable, and that's cool. I do find some liberation. It's funny. It's like, well, you're saying ignorance is bliss. And I'm like, well, in some regards, yes, because it's a fruitless endeavor since I know already that I don't have the capacity to process that and to make sense of it. So that's okay.
But you will always ask.
Yes.
And you'll always try to figure it out.
Because I can't stop that.
Because you can't start it.
And because I can't start it. That's right.
That's the amazing thing.
Yeah.
To keep coming back to that is almost like this weird mantra or something,
Yeah.
For being present.
Yeah.
And it's so funny when you say being present, like you have to do present.
Right.
Like
yeah.
like
you aren't just present.
Right. So it's,
but it's the awareness of the present.
It's the conscious awareness of being consciously aware.
Right. Yeah.
Which isn't personal. And that's another sticking point. It's not a feeling of, no, this is me.
Yeah.
It's not even that.
Right. Yeah. Well, and, part of that's just Western, hyperfixation on individualism and stuff. But.
I know, but it's really, whatever that sticking point is for Ryan personally, or whatever this story is, he cannot fathom not feeling like I'm me.
Yeah.
It sounds terrifying.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, yeah.
Well, I mean, I was just going to say that's why, so many people cling on to the idea of an afterlife, and in their conception of it, it's not much different than how they experience life now.
Right.
And it's like, that's just because you don't want to let go. You don't want to see the experience end.
The way that I've heard it, and we've talked about this too, we're going to talk about everything the same every time. But this is really, it's all the same thing. So it's there's a feeling of me, and it's not a thought. There's a thought of me, and then there's a feeling in the body of being me. I am separate from this stuff.
Yeah.
And it has nothing to do with the thought of me. It's just, it's like, you feel like, it's almost like, what do they say? It's like a wave in the ocean. The wave is the water, but it seems like a separate wave.
Yeah. What is it? The awareness or the consciousness is when the wave realizes it's the ocean or something like that.
Kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah. But how could the wave ever realize the water? Because the wave is the water.
Right.
That's what I mean. So,
Yeah.
so it's like, it's taking this thing that isn't real in the first place, that's trying to figure out all this way to not be what it thinks it is.
Yeah.
And that is an impossibility, because that sounds like the stupidest shit ever. Ever. It sounds like, I mean, if you laid it down and just read that over and over again, it might do something really cool to you. Or like you might disappear. I don't know.
Yeah,
or whatever it
Explode.
is. Like, yeah. But it doesn't stop the story from going on, and it doesn't stop the body or the tangible feeling of me. It's almost like a condensed energy feeling, like I'm here. This is where you at? Well, you ask different people that. I feel like I'm behind my eyes.
Yeah.
In the middle of my head, maybe, or maybe a few inches behind that's where I feel like I am, because I'm an analytical type person, I think.
Right. Yeah.
I asked Sabin, and she said below that, like it kind of in the heart area. And I'm like, wow, that's interesting.
Yeah. 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 I mean, I don't know. I would think eyes. I mean, that's the first thing that comes to my mind is behind my eyes. But then the very next thing would be my mouth.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Too. Yeah.
Yeah. Don't psychoanalyze that, listeners.
Yeah. Like, where are you located?
Right.
You know? And
Big toe.
It's pretty interesting where that's the first time I ever really heard that. Anybody say that, because, you know, you go through this little exercise of like slicing things away, imaginary, like, you know, am I below the waist? Am I above the waist? You just keep going until you reach this weird spot of like, oh, okay, so what I am is this 4-inch by 2-inch rectangle, maybe about 3 inches behind my eyes.
Yeah.
And then the thing after that is, okay, well, you just are looking at that right now.
Right. Yeah.
So that can't be what you are.
Right. Yeah. Try again.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not the command module. Everyone wants to think it's
It's another thing.
Right. Yeah.
It's another story.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, at the end of the day, that's all it is. It's just stories. And it's just people trying to understand their experience. And some people will take easy answers and some people will take no answers.
So, to sum up, there's no free will, there's no choice, there's no you, there's no now, there's no time, and you can't know nothing.
That pretty much is it. Also, fun little challenge for everyone. In the next week, just really try to see where your thoughts originate from. Just give it a go.
Yeah, maybe I won't put that first part in. Yeah, in the game, the dream, the whatever, like in the fun of it, just play and maybe try to do experiments and see what it means to be where you're actually at.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and my favorite thing for my own personal amusement is if I think this, how will I feel like emotionally?
Oh, that's a good one too.
I love that game.
Yeah, because the emotion really drives everything.
Yeah.
I mean, if we're going back into this whole dream thing now, like it's just everything's possible.
Right.
So it's almost like there's a formula.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
know?
but and that's the whole thing. If everything is possible, that also means nothing is possible.
Right. Right. That's what it means. But yeah, I mean, why not play? You're here to. It seems like we're not here for anything.
Yeah,
but
we're not here.
Yeah, I know. God damn it.
I know.
All right, we better stop.
Yeah. Thank you.
is clear. Push forward. Holding on.